Hello, it's Wren. Welcome to my studio. Valentine, the studio cat, has joined us, and I've been painting the peace rose in oils. It's from my garden. I've got a beautiful cottage garden, and it's springtime here in Australia, and the roses will be glorious right through until late autumn. So I hope you love roses because I'll be doing a lot of rose painting. That and paintings of the Golden Valley of Australia that I love. And I also hope to do a painting of Yosemite Valley at about this time of year. I was over there to have Thanksgiving with my sister, who's a resident of Sonoma County. I've been trying to check up on her with the fires at the moment, but of course the power outrage in the area, I have to be patient and wait and hear back. So my mind's been on California while I've been painting my rose garden here in Australia. And well, that's it with the internet. We have friends all over the world, including family. Well, I'm striving to paint more impressionistically. All my life I mainly painted romantic realism, not photorealism, romantic realism, which is looser and freer, and also tonal impressionist style. I was being trained in, but that's what I'm trying to focus on now. So for some people's minds, my rose that I paint won't be fully finished, but if you wish to detail your work more, that's an option. It's really just time. You could spend another 10 hours on a painting like the one I'm demonstrating for you, but I've actually spent 2 hours on this painting, and I've condensed it down to just over 30 minutes in time. Basically, I've edited out all the bits where I reach for extended periods of time to mix paint, so that you're not wasting your time where I'm doing very little. And I've also doubled up the speed of the actual painting, so it's still slow enough for you to see how I do each brush stroke, but it's not a boring 2 hours. It's condensed to a tighter, I think, 35 minutes. Now, feel welcome to ask questions in the comments, and I'll strive to answer them in detail in future tutorials. Now, I have been very brave this week. I have completely divided myself off into 3 different YouTube channels that are identified with my name. If you'd like to check below in the description or even the comments, you'll see a link where you can subscribe just for oil or acrylic tutorials, or just for soft pastel or soft pastel pencil tutorials, or just for the ink, drawing, pencils and watercolour tutorials. I've divided off, as I said, into 3 different sections. That means that if you hit the notification bell to get notified, you'll only get notified of those particular tutorial demonstrations that you're interested in, and you won't get annoyed by all the other ones. I've done that for you. It's extra work for me. I think I'm up to it at the moment. And yeah, I'd love to have your support, your subscription. If you feel like sharing it with other people you know that are interested in those specific mediums, that's an enormous help to me, because it kicks the logarithms in if I have more viewers, and more people who are interested in these tutorial demonstrations will be able to see those videos. So again, leave a comment, let me know what it is that you're interested in. I'm only too happy to try to bring you the content that you're interested in, whether it's more flower paintings, whether you'd like to see more landscapes. You tell me. In my drawing and watercolour one, there's going to be cats and dogs. I'm going to do caricature of them. So I've painted for decades, so I can't be restrained to just one field of art. I love expressing myself. I've got my pastels out at the moment, my oil paints out at the moment, my ink and drawing and watercolours are all out, spread around this huge studio now with a space for each thing. But rather than inundate you with all those types of art when you might just have a preferred subject, I've given 3 different channels, each with its own focus. So I'm hoping that that's helpful for you. Let me know. I'll go through the art materials I'm working with. I'm working with artist quality oil paint. Now, I have worked with many brands of artist quality oil paints, and there isn't any that I don't like, but I have my favourites, and my merry Puro oil is my favourite. It's also one of the most expensive, but in use it doesn't come out as the most expensive. Very often you'll find that. I used to sell Art Spectrum to my students because it was professional quality at a very affordable price, and it was an extremely good brand. I'd used it for decades, so I was quite happy to recommend it. But occasionally I would treat them to a free tube of the Mameri Puro oil, which I'm just guessing the tube might have been 3 times more costly, just to show them that in use the paint went further. Generally the price of a paint is reflected by how much pigment is in the paint and the cost of the oil, whether it's a quality oil or a less expensive oil. For instance, linseed oil is a lot cheaper than poppy seed oil, and the tubes of paint that I was working with contained pigment and poppy seed oil, whereas the Art Spectrum and the Winsor & Newton Artist Quality, Grumbacher, Brownies, they're all linseed oil based, so they're less expensive to manufacture. A student grade paint will have less pigment and a lot more fillers in it, so they get cheaper again, simply because they have less of the quality materials. So the more you dilute the pigment, the less intensity and vibrance the colour has. The more you add fillers to the paint, the duller the paint becomes. The easier it is to paint mud. That's what students complain about. They say that, they get muddy. Well, they will if they use student paint, because the paint's muddy to begin with, full of ground up plasterboard offcuts and seashells and whatever garbage that they can put in to bulk it out, so they can use less pigment, so you have less tinting power and you don't have the clear vibrancy of the colours that you'll get with artist quality. So it's things that initially look to be a more expensive product are not necessarily more expensive when you use them. Your artist quality paint will always go further and give you a better result than your student grade paint. So I always started my students off, even their first painting, with artist quality. So that's just my recommendation. Don't even bother with the student grade. It's false economy. Better to get yourself just red, yellow and blue and a tube of white of the best quality paint, and gradually build from there. So it's not important which brand you work with, but quality is important. And many brands will put out both a student grade and a professional quality. And sometimes it's very hard to know the difference. There's one company with, say, watercolours, and they have a watercolour for artists and an artist's watercolour. And one is a student grade and one is a professional one. So often you have to get down into the reading the fine print, asking to see the technical data, maybe asking for the most experienced salesperson at your art store to advise you, because unfortunately it is not always clear whether or not you're dealing with an artist quality or a student grade. And your best quality paints are never more essential than when you're trying to paint flowers with the beautiful vibrancy of colours. Now, once you've chosen your oil paint, you then need to have to decide, are you going to use mediums or not? Now, many artists today love some of the modern mediums, which are highly toxic, and I don't recommend them. The traditional art mediums contained linseed oil, and linseed oil yellows with age. You start diluting your paint down with a medium that is going to yellow with age, your painting is going to yellow with age. So all those lovely vibrant lights that you can now see on my painting, they would go a dirty yellow. And all the extreme darks, they will go a dirty yellow. So my darkest darks would become muted and more mid-dark tone, and my lightest lights would become more muted and medium light tone. So I would end up with, instead of having a painting that went from extremely dark to extremely light, the painting would end up going from medium light through to medium dark. It would lose its vibrancy. So that's what happens if you use some of the traditional art mediums. And of course, if you use some of those modern art mediums, liquid is one of them, they're toxic. Well, this piece rose is too joyful for me to feel like doing the health and safety rant today, but enough to warn you, if you don't like health and safety rants, then you better move away from my channel, because I have some strong views about working safely. Now, to sum all that up into useful information, I have not used any art medium. I've just worked with the pure oil paint straight onto the stretch canvas. There was no need to use an art medium. My paint was supple, it was easy to apply, I had no problem. Perhaps the paint that you have won't handle well for you, and you do feel that you need a medium. Maybe instead of using a medium which has volatile thinners in it, which are toxic to inhale, perhaps you could consider experimenting and trying a better quality oil paint. Again, my Mary Perot is the one that I use. There are many extremely good brands which are as close as you can get to just the pure pigment with just enough of the medium, the oil carrier, to get that pigment into a workable consistency and an absolute minimum or no fillers or dryers added. There's no dryers added to my Mary Perot oil. With many of the oil paints you will have dryers added. Now that gives you the convenience of a painting that's going to dry quicker. With my Mary Perot oil, I won't varnish my painting for 12 months. I make sure the painting is absolutely dry. Don't fall for the tutorials that suggest that you can varnish a painting when it is touch dry. An oil painting does not dry by evaporation like acrylic paint. It dries by oxidation, which takes many months. If you put dryers, use one of the paints that has dryers in them. Art Spectrum has dryers in. I still waited 3 to 6 months. 3 months only. It was an extremely thin painting, normally about 6 months before I would have put the final varnish on the work. Don't do it after a week or a month because you're anxious to get the painting off and sell. The painting will sweat under that varnish, and you will have destroyed the archival quality of the varnish of the painting. So it's very important to follow the instructions. They're there, not as rules of how you must paint. It doesn't matter whether you want to paint modern or impressionistic or photorealist. Those aren't rules that are important. That's just preference. But when it comes down to things like thick paint over thin paint, or fat paint containing more oil over lean paint containing less or no oil, and not varnishing your painting until it's technically dry, not touch dry, those rules are important for the integrity, for ensuring that the person who has the painting after it's ready to leave home has a painting that's going to last. Doing paintings that don't contain fillers, they're the things that are going to help. So I try to teach you the ways that is going to end up with a painting that's archival quality, starting with this archival quality canvas that I begin with, my archival quality paint, and painting in a way that will last. So hoping that's helpful. I heard you asking me, stop talking about paint theory and talk about the actual painting, how you do it. I'm using a painting knife. Now, a painting knife and a palette knife are two different things. The painting knife has the blade and then the cranked handle upwards and then the handle. And so you can hold the handle with your hand well above your painting surface, whereas a palette knife, they tend to have a longer blade, and it may or may not have a cranked handle, but it's got the longer handle and you can hold it and apply pressure to scrape your palette clean. You can use a palette knife perhaps for handy person chores, but your painting knife, make sure you treat that blade with respect. It's got to be beautiful and smooth for applying that paint on your canvas without any little, you can get dents and damaged burrs on the metal, so you've got to be very careful with it. If you're working with acrylics, you can use a plastic painting or palette knife because the blade is going near water, and oftentimes the palette knife or painting knife can rust if you leave water in contact with it for a period of time. So a metal blade perhaps for your oil painting, and optional either a metal blade or a plastic blade if you're doing acrylic paint. Everything that I'm doing basically could be done in acrylic paint, so that's why I'm calling this channel the one for oil or acrylic painting. And when I work with the acrylic paint, I do it in an oil painting technique. The major difference is you need to perhaps keep your paint moist. I have a bottle with a water in it and a spray cap, and I will apply a spray mist onto the acrylic paint if I'm just wanting to keep it slightly damp while I keep working in it. Again, you don't have to use a lot of mediums. Mediums are there as an option, but you can do an acrylic painting just with the acrylic paint, just by knowing how to manipulate and blend that paint. Same as I can do my oil painting without mediums. Mediums are not an essential thing that you have to use. I'm at the stage of the painting that I call the refinement stage now, and this usually includes some blending. I love patches of blending in my painting, whether it be with the oils and acrylics or even when I'm doing the pastels in my pastels channel. I like to have some areas of the paint where it's lovely and blended, and that's by virtue of having contrast. We need contrast of light and shade, and we also need contrast of textures in a painting. And we have contrasts in the colour harmony that we choose, both the optically warm and the optically cooler colours. Generally, but not always, your lightest colours will be those areas of the flower painting that are reflecting the sunlight. So it's a good idea to put the tiniest minuscule amount of the warm, optically warm colours that you associate with sunlight. You could range from the yellow, lemon yellow through to yellows, through to yellow oranges, maybe to orange. Very small amount. You don't want to darken the light, you just want to optically warm the light. Similarly, your shadow colours will tend to have one of the optically cool colours in, and they will range from the blue violets through the blue tones through to the blue greens. So you're less likely to have a very dark yellow green in a painting like this. You're more likely to have a blue green, a very dark blue green, so dark that the actual colour is very hard to discern. You know, you have to look very hard into your shadow colours to see what colour they are. You know, what is that colour? And that's how your shadows are. The colours don't jump out at you, obviously. Similarly, you look, now for instance, this is you might call it a lilac t-shirt, but look at the high points where the light is hitting, and you've got optical illusions of light. If you were to paint those light areas in this t-shirt of mine, you might add a little bit of the lemon yellow into that mixture, or even a little bit of a red, very, very pale, but you would be leaving out the blue tones where you're trying to express the brightest lights on the high points where the light is hitting. Similarly on my chin here, if I was to paint that, you're not looking for a flesh colour, you're looking for the light, the warm colour, all these highlights in my skin. There would be a lot more likely to be the warmer tones, you know, a little bit of perhaps lemon yellow in that mixture if I was to mix it. Whereas you're looking into these shadow areas, there's more blue violet perhaps, maybe even some blue green. If I was olive skinned, which I'm not, I'm more of a peach skin. There's a lot of blue undertone in my skin. But some people, if they have more of a golden complexion, they might have more of the the blue greens, a bit of viridian green mixed into it, if they were doing those shadows. And I'm diverging, I know, from the flower, but it's the same for all. Even my Valentine up here, he has been a good demonstration tutorial model for light and shade. If you look at the white up around his neck here, here's a tuxedo cat. It's not a pure white, and at the top, where he's more in shadow, the white, there would probably be a little bit of blue in that mixture, but it'd be a very greyed back blue. You're not seeing colour, you're seeing grey. So you would be adding a little bit of the opposite to blue, which would be perhaps orange, and you'd be mixing a bit of blue, greyed back with a little bit of orange, into that white to get the colouring just right to do that white area. But now there's a little bit of white just under his chin here, right in that area. Hello, Valentine. And it's brighter. And so that white would have a little bit of the lemon mixed into it. And so that's how you adapt the optical illusion of warm or cold into the colour that you're mixing, with more optical warm colouring into the brightest lights and more of the illusion of the cool colours. I mean, they're not cold to touch. Blue is not cold to touch, but it gives you the illusion of coolness. So you are playing around exaggeration, because we cannot possibly paint anything as bright as sunlight. We cannot paint anything as dark, as pitch dark. We're restricted to what we have on our palette, which is totally inadequate to paint real life. So we have to exaggerate slightly. So we go as light as we can on our palette, and we optically warm that colour, but not enough to darken it. And we go as dark as we can on our palette, and we optically cool it. And that gives us a wider exaggeration of our light to our dark when we're actually come to doing that painting. And if you're painting in subdued lighting, like indoors, you might need to use those extremes. But if you're trying to paint something that suggests being outside with bright sunlight, where you've got bright light, you've also got intense darks. So even here you can see there are some intense darks. There's areas where I have intense dark, but I also have areas of extreme bright light. The silver grey in my hair there'd be a little bit of the optically warm light, you know, the tiny bit of lemon yellow into that white. Painting that, and you can see in here a lot more of the blue tone is in there. Now, these are not colours that shriek out and jump out and say, this is blue, that's yellow, or that's perhaps, you know, some red in it. It's very subtle. A little bit of warm red. From where I'm sitting here, under the light source that I'm seeing, you may see something different, but I could see where I would mix a little red into the mixture there. We're still coming up with a grey, but there's that subtlety of warming a tone or cooling it, as well as getting dark to light. And this is how we're able to actually do the form of a rose. We're getting the lights and shades where they belong. Some tutorials will tell you to do a rose, you do a little C, and then you do another little C and another C, and you keep on going with your C's getting bigger and bigger. And you know that's not how you draw a rose. You paint a rose by learning to see. And to learn to be able to see comes from practicing. And you've got to learn by practicing, by doing real things. You know, try drawing or painting a real rose. Try drawing and painting a real hand. You're not going to get there by getting a book or a tutorial that shows you a stylized way of drawing a rose or drawing your hand. You don't learn to draw your hand from looking at a picture of a hand in a book. You do it by looking at your hand. Similarly, you do the rose by studying the rose form and trying to duplicate where you see that shadow pattern on that rose, where you see the mid-tone, where you see the medium tone, where you see the medium light, and then finally, when I get to the detail stage of this painting, the bright highlights go in. And that's how you paint your rose. Getting your tones right in the proportion that they are, in the shape that they are, and gradually building up. Starting step one, plan the work. My plan was to paint the rose from my garden, a nice soft form loose rose, not a tight stiff rose, painted in a relaxed impressionistic way, not over detailed. That was my plan. I roughed in the basic pattern onto my canvas. You can start with a light drawing using charcoal, which will dust off as you work. Don't use pencil or biro, that'll bleed through the painting. And then, so that you have the plan, then you have your block in, which you saw me do, working fairly thin with my paint. And then I got into the refining, and that's when I did any blending or any bits of canvas where I hadn't quite covered. I made sure I'd covered every part of the painting. And then I get to this detailing, where I go in and I intensify my darkest darks, and I intensify my lightest lights. I might make any little subtle changes I think I might need to make for composition purposes. I make sure I've got good aerial perspective in the painting, that I've got the depth of feeling like you're looking into the flower garden. That's how I like to paint my flowers. So plan it, block it in, refine it and detail it. And stop when you're ready. I'm stopping at an impressionistic stage, and you can take your work through to a more finished stage if you like that type of more detailed sort of work. So if you're interested in a style of nature-inspired artwork that's getting freer and looser, where you're influenced by the beauty of nature or wildlife or your pets, the garden, the landscape, but you don't want to be overly controlled and stiff with your work or painted in a tight photorealist manner, then I think my channels will suit you. As I said, I will strive to answer your questions in the videos, and there will be 3 different channels to choose from, which you'll find the links to down below in the description or in the comment section. And you can go to a channel specifically soft pastels, which I hope to get very impressionistic with, or this one for oils or acrylics in an oil painting technique, and in the watercolor, which will be line and wash with pencils and ink. A lot of fun, and I hope to do a lot of caricature style. I'm really inspired to do dogs and cats that show their personality. If that appeals to you, then I would love to have you subscribe and follow, hit the notification bell so you know when my next video is coming up, and don't forget to like and comment so I know you're there for encouragement and I know what it is that's appealing to you, so I can make my channel more appealing to you. Well, Valentine's headed to the kitchen, hoping for breakfast. The sun's coming up. I started this last night and haven't gone to bed. That's what editing videos does for you. If you're a creator, you'll understand. Now, Brenda mentioned that she has trouble controlling a brush. Can you see there's an odd hair playing out from that brush? But other than that, the brush is a beautiful quality brush. It bends from the ferrule and it snaps back, and it comes to a reasonably good quality control point. Now compare that, say, to that brush there. See how the tips of that brush all splay out? You wouldn't have any control. You wouldn't be able to do any detail. This brush here, the pure sable brush, can you see how that points up exquisitely? That brush there, you have a lot of control with that brush. So if you have trouble doing brush work, it may not be you, it may be your brush. Most people came to me for tuition would have had probably about 10 very poor quality brushes, and the kind of quality brush that they needed would have cost them more for the brush than all of the other 12. And unless you had good quality brushes, same as good quality paints, you just can't do good quality work. This ferrule, that's a metal ferrule. See how long that ferrule is? The hairs of this brush go all the way down to that ferrule. That's where they're gripped, not here. They're gripped down there. So you're paying for high quality hair all the length of the ferrule. Whereas your cheaper brushes, they will have cheaper quality ferrules. Often, if you don't know what to look for, you're looking for the quality of that ferrule. If that ferrule is well made, firmly gripped and it's a long ferrule, you've got a reasonable good chance that it's a good brush. Don't ever, and I'll do what not to do here, if you're checking out what you need for a brush, don't ever rummage your fingers through the brush like that. That's destroying the shape. Don't go into a shop and do that. Like squeezing the vegetables the wrong way in the fruit shop. You can gently apply pressure downwards and see if the brush snaps back. A good brush will snap back quickly and you'll actually almost hear that snap. That's a good brush, and see how it snapped back and maintained its reasonable tight point. Whereas this one here, it's still a good brush, it was in the first place, so yeah, there's a really good snap back, but there's no precision point. What I used that brush for actually was silk painting way back in my, as I said, I had a lot more mediums that I worked in through the years, and silk painting was one of them. That's why it's identified with the colour. I had a different brush for each colour dye. I've now taken that as one of my acrylic brushes, but it would be no good for the detail work. The last painting I did in acrylics, the one before this in my tutorial videos, where I glazed the Eastern Rosella painting, which is now sold, by the way. It's sold within a couple of days of being completed. I think it sold before it was even completed. They were interested in it. Mixed feelings about that because I rather like that painting, but it's gone to a good home. So anyway, I could not have done something like that Eastern Rosella with all that detail with a brush like that, no way. But a brush like that I could, because I have control. So if you're having trouble painting, it may not be you, it may be your tools. They say a bad workman blames his tools, but you can't do good work without good tools. So just like with your paints, less of higher quality is better than a lot of poorer quality ones, and then gradually build up from there. So I always advise you to get good quality because you deserve it. I'm reaching the stage of the painting that artists call more look than put. This is where you step back and you assess the work and you ask, what does the painting need? Now if you ask what can I do next, you'll never finish the painting. You can go on and over tighten it. You can wreck the painting if you ask the wrong question. So you need to ask the right question. The right question at this stage is, what does it need? And you only do what it needs, and then you've got to learn to stop. And something that people ask me, how do I know when the painting is finished? What does it need? It needs some compositional work. At this stage, we've got like the flower sitting there stark on a background. We've got to make this look like a garden. So the need was compositional. It wasn't to fiddle more with the rose. It was to incorporate the rose as part of the garden. So by asking the right question, you'll get the right answer. So keep that in mind when you're near the finishing stage. Step back, more look than put. Look at your work. What does it need? Don't touch it until it gives you the answer. Even if you have to put it up on show, go to bed, come back the next day, look at it, or go for a walk, come back, look at it. The painting will speak to you. The painting will tell you what it needs. Do that, the finishing touches, step back. If it stops telling you it needs anything, the painting's finished. So it really is okay to work slower at this stage. You're taking in the whole painting. Try not to ever look at the last brush stroke. Try to envision the whole work so that you're working all over the whole painting, pulling it all together. Taking your time, seeing the whole picture, working boldly and impressionistic with some confident brushwork. Don't try over refine. Don't try to refine every brush stroke out of the painting. People want to see the texture of a painting. They want to see that it's not a photograph. So don't feel, if you put down a bold brush mark, that you've got to go back and fiddle with it. Put the brush mark down, move aside, look at the whole painting, not the brush mark. Ask what does it need, see where you need to go back in, put those brush marks in, move back. Don't look at the brush marks, look at the whole painting. Keep saying, what does it need? If you keep focusing on that brush mark, you're going to want to over-refine and over-refine and fiddle. And of course, the more you're working into wet paint, into wet paint, into wet paint, the more you're muddying those colours together, the more you're getting that muddy look, which designates, shows an amateur work. Oil painting is a beautiful medium. It's probably the easiest medium to learn if you've got a good tutor who can stop you fiddling, and even for yourself, even with experience. You've got to know when, what does it need? Doesn't need anything. Stop. Well, if I've helped you, you can help me if you'd like to by recommending my channel to your art-loving friends. You can treat me to a cup of coffee. If you like, my Patreon link is down below or in the comments. You can treat yourself to a cup of coffee yourself in one of my art decorated mugs. The link to my art print store is also in the comments, and all of that will help me produce these videos. And don't forget to comment. Let me know what it is that I can help you with.